Hello, this is a very simple example to explain how to link tables with data to information that entities should have attached in terms of states or information that should be used when processing those entities. So what we have here is two sources that produce part A and B respectively. Okay, if these entities are sent to this node where they are there's a process which I'll comment later on, and from there are sent to servers, to sequential servers, and then finally sent to a sink. So I want to have different processing times for server 1 and 2 depending on the part they are processing, and that is in this table. We have a table with a key, which is the type of part, and then we have processing times, which are 1 and 2 for part A and 3 and 6 for part B, corresponding to servers 1 and 2 respectively. So what I've done is assign or create the logic for server 1 and server 2 in different ways. One, this first server, what it does is it uses directly the information from the table. So what I write in the processing time property is processing times dot processing time 1, so that when an entity arrives here, the server should know what is the row it has to use. So for that, we need to set a row corresponding to each entity. And that is what we do with this process, or at least with two steps of this process. This process, what does is the following. First, it goes to the table processing times and does a search. It's a table rows search. So we have different options when we use this search step. And one is browsing or going through all the rows of a table, which is what we are doing here, specifically this table, the only table we have. And what we do is we try to find the row where the model entity dot entity type, which is A or B, depending on what is the entity that triggers this process, is equal. That's the state of that model is equal to the value of the field part of that table. So I want to select row 1 when it's a part type part of type A that triggers the process, and I want to select row 2 when that happens for part B. So going back to the process, once I found that row, okay, then I want to save that number in the token dot return value. The token is kind of the pointer that follows all the steps along the process. So I store that value here, and then I use it for setting the row. So what I do is go to the table, and with this SetRow step, I assign the row that I have stored in token dot return value to that entity that triggers the process, so that anywhere the entity goes, it has a row linked when it comes to that table. So when I do that, and I go to server 1, and if I write here, processing times dot process time 1, the server knows that the entity is linked to that table by means of using the row 1 if it's type A and the row 2 if it's type B. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to run the model, and I'm going to stop here when the search step is executed. And I'm going to run it, and I have this model trace activated, and I can see this search 1 is where the process stops. I do a step, and I have several things I want to see that. I'm searching the collection table rows, blah, 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 and I found one item, okay? I save this item 1 because this is a part of type A. So I saved the number 1 in the token for return value. And then if I step forward, let's see, at some point here, there is I don't see exactly now where is the set row, but it should be somewhere here. The process ended, so it should be somewhere up here. Okay. Okay. Yes, there we are. Table reference for object or element 8.21 set to row index 1. So this part 8.21 is linked to the first row of this table, so that when the server comes here, or the server receives the entity and has to process it, when I write here what I showed before, processing times dot processing time, the server gets to know that this entity is linked to row 1. So it'll come here, it'll go to row 1, and it'll use that value here, which is corresponding to processing time 1. Actually, I'm going to remove this breakpoint, and I'm going, let's see, it's time 0, and notice that I should be done with this entity of this part up to 1 hour. So I'm going to create a breakpoint here. So when I fast forward, I should see that actually it's in time 1 that the entity has been processed. So this is correct. Okay, the second way to link the information of that table so that it can be used is by means of creating a state for that model entity. So if I go to model entity, I created a state which is processing time. Okay, and what I do is I go to model process, and I add an additional step I didn't comment it previously, which is once I get the row, I assign the value of that table corresponding to the row I just found. I could remove that. In this case, if I'm using the assign option, I just can get rid of this, and once I've searched the the value, I could do this. Okay. Well, maybe it should be a little bit different, but since we already, let's keep it like it is now. Since we have this set row, when we do the assign, what we are doing is going to the table processing times process time 2 to that field, and I assign that value to this processing time 2 state of the model entity. So it goes with the entity throughout the whole time it is in the system. And I can use it, for example, here in the server 2, instead of using the table, I can use the state of the entity. Both work okay. What I just did is I created, look at these labels here, corresponding to the state processing time 2 and 2, so that I can see, or I can watch these elements and these entities and see they are getting the right information, but I could just create that label to make my life easier. So if I run the model, what I see is that all the entities that get to, okay, I should, yeah, there we go. All the entities that are waiting at server 1 that went through basic node 1 and triggered the process which assigns the value to the state have their corresponding values 6 to 66, which are the values we have here in this table, which are 2 and 6, depending on what type of parts they are. And this information will be used here. So in this case, we're using the table directly server 1 by means of setting the row previously. And in this case, we are using this, the property, or sorry, the state of the entity, which we assigned in this very same process. So this can be useful for linking information stored in tables to the entities or the processes that we have in our model. I hope this is helpful for you. Thank you, and bye-bye.